Ayanna Pressley, the Democrat from Massachusetts, she said during a conference, she said, we don't need any more black faces that don't have black voice. Do you think that that's like a racist statement?
I don't know if it's racist. I think it's dumb. I worry about, the same way that like you might worry that somebody is saying that like, what you're describing as like woke redefinitions of racism and stuff, that it's like too close, it's too far from the original thing that's giving the moral charge to the accusation for it to be fair to apply the same word to it. I worry that even if you say, well, okay, we need to have like affirmative action programs to sort of undo the legacy of the disadvantages that come out of these or whatever. That you think that, well, that's too close to just being an inversion of white racism. I worry about taboo spread. I worry about saying,
Hmm.
hey, here's the thing we agree is clearly bad, and we're just going to kind of have a taboo about where we sort of consider it to be like off the table for discussion. All societies presumably are going to have some of those, but I worry about expanding the tent of things that are covered by those taboos and we can't talk about anymore.
Sure. Ayanna Presley, the Democrat from Massachusetts, she said, or she tweeted that we don't know. She said it during a conference. She said, we don't need any more black faces that don't have black voices. Do you think that that's like a racist statement?
I don't know if it's racist. I think it's dumb.
What do you think she's saying there? Because I interpret that as her saying that essentially, if you don't have specific opinions, that you're not really black.
Yeah, or that you're not really like, I mean, I guess maybe you're not really speaking for the interests of black people, that you're like really, speaking for the interests of some sort of white structure suppressing black people or whatever.
Hmm.
One of the reasons
I
I
mean,
think
that's kind
it's
of
dumb,
racist, but
sure. I mean, I'm not really. I mean, the reason I think it's dumb is because I think it flattens all black people into having the same interests, which
yeah,
is
which is racist. Yeah.
which is I think is just like whether or not you want to apply this word racism to it and
Hmm.
like sort of take the moral charge that we all have about that word racism, because what we're thinking about is segregated drinking fountains and fire hoses, and like extend the concept to this or not, whether or not we want to apply the word racism to it. I think I think it's inaccurate. I think it's flattening. I think there are I think there are black workers and black bosses, and black landlords and black tenants, and black poor people who would benefit from policies that I like, and black rich people who wouldn't, and black middle class people whose interests primarily lie in making it a little bit easier for them to advance up a class structure that like I have
Hmm.
a more fundamental objection to, and that's just not a helpful
Right.
way to talk. I think that there's a sort of I think it's incredibly unhelpful that so much of American progressive political energy has sort of needs to define everything as a form of racism,
Hmm.
to be against it, right? That like it's not. I think it's sort of like the last thing since World War II we kind of all agreed on as a society, eventually, was that the segregation was bad and the civil rights movement is good. And so, I get this disconcerting sense that there are a lot of people who can only get it up for any sort of political action that they can frame as a
Well,
reenactment of that. And I
hmm.
think the best of the civil rights movement,
Right.
people like Bayard Rustin, understood that whereas it is true that the sort of long historical shadow of segregation and all that sort of contributes to these injustices, like
Right.
all black people being
Well,
more
yeah.
likely to live in poverty and everything than white
Hmm.
people, that the solution was actually a universalist solution, that the
Yes.
solution is stuff like Bayard Rustin's freedom budget, that we need sort of universal economic policies that are just going to help with poverty in general, both because that's what we're going to be able to get together like a majority for. I mean, I don't understand how you're supposed to convince people to support something like reparations that would be a sort of racially means tested form of assistance that most people wouldn't qualify for. And so it's both pragmatically that makes more sense, strategically, and I think it also makes more sense morally as a goal, because like I don't actually object, like the sort of the
That's because you're
thing.
racist. That's why you think that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that seems primarily objectionable to me about lots of black people living in poverty, et cetera, is that anybody is living in poverty, regardless of, regardless of race. And, and I'm not denying the disproportionality, but I think we should sort of keep our eyes on that larger, more fundamental goal.
Well, I guess, and I don't know how much time you have left, but my last question, if you are out of time, is if you don't like the concept of CRT or wokeness kind of deriving or being rooted in something socialist or Marxist, what would, like, where does it come from then? What is it like derived from philosophically?
Yeah. I think that it comes from a misdiagnosis of the exact thing that I was just saying, right? That we'd say, okay, here's the situation that everybody can kind of see. And I think this is it much more than any sort of like grand theoretical thing that, that's kind of what people are start looking for when they want to assemble academic, theories to justify their political perspective. But I think the sort of basic political perspective is you have 1964, 1965, we largely end this like de jure racial discrimination we had in the United States. So it's no longer the case. We have segregated schools and drinking fountains and all that stuff. But you notice, I think correctly, that there is all this disparity, right? That it's not like instantly you have as many black people and white people in sort of more desirable and less desirable positions. And it doesn't seem likely that disparity is going to go away on its own anytime soon. It seems like there are a lot of black people in really undesirable positions, living in poor neighborhoods that, especially if we go ahead a little bit from the mid 60s to like the 70s and 80s and 90s, right, are subjected to, various kinds of, policing and sort of carceral approaches that people find objectionable, that have a million social problems.
Do you think it's just a product
right.
of the environment? You don't think it's rooted in some philosophical teaching or anything?
I think people look at that sort of correct premise that is the situation. And they sort of say, okay, well, what's our analysis of how it came to be this situation and what should we do about it? And I think that they have sort of incorrect answers to both of those that are rooted in seeing the new stuff as just a straightforward continuation of the old stuff, rather than seeing the new stuff as a different problem that requires a different solution. They're saying like, okay, well, this must just be like a disguised form of this thing that we thought we just defeated, rather than saying like, no, look, people have the main problem is that if people are, not that racial prejudice ceased to exist, or that nobody with political or economic power was acting on the base or whatever. Obviously, that's not true. But like the main problem is just, hey, if you're born in poverty, you're way more likely to die in poverty than somebody who wasn't born in poverty. That like whatever, wherever you are when segregation ends, right, you're probably going to. I think just the sort of normal mechanism of capitalist property relations. There's going to be, not completely, this black middle class that's emerged since then, et cetera, but like to a very great extent, it's going to be hard to get over that on any kind of reasonable time scale. And that the solution to that, again, I think is a universalist one, much more than a sort of racially specific one, right? So I think that it's a bad but understandable diagnosis of real conditions, of where they come from and what to do about them. And I think it's one that's maybe also especially understandable when you start thinking about like the 90s and 2000s, when these sort of more basic questions about how to organize an economy, et cetera, were sort of taken off the table. That this is the era of the end of history. There is no alternative. That, this is the idea that we were going to have these grand debates about capitalism and socialism and all that stuff was just sort of seen as kind of quaint and dated. And so I think it makes sense under these circumstances, especially, that these sort of views that assigned the primacy of explanation to race gain more traction, and views that were all about class less so. And I'd like to reverse that.
It'd be interesting. I don't know if you've ever done this, for you to have a conversation with a CRT person.
It would
kind of argue with them about how they perceive that CRT has this, philosophical foundation of Marxism or not. that'd be an interesting conversation maybe between the two of you guys to have that.
Yeah, I mean, there are people who certainly try to combine some of these ideas. I find a
Mhm.
lot of that. I find a lot of that unhelpful, right? Like I think
Mhm.
I think that's Freddie DeBoer has a nice article a while back whose title always sticks in my head. It's very simple. It's just perhaps we can't do both.
Wow,
Like,
that's you're saying that because you're white though, so
yeah,
I don't know if you know that.
fair enough.
Hi, you just listened to a clip from the Sitch and Adams show. If you like what you heard, you can listen to our live show right here on this channel on Sunday, starting at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. And if you want, you can super chat us. We read $20 and up super chats on the show and then do a follow-up stream on the following Tuesday where we read the rest of the unread super chats and interact with fans of the show. Subscribe to this channel right here to listen to the live show or to listen to more of our awesome clips.